Good evening from the News Radio, 1120 AM and 93.7 FM KPNW studios. I am ace pitcher Chigger McGee, sometimes known as Bill London. I co-host the Wake Up Call, 6 a.m. to 9 on KPNW, which streams worldwide at kpnw.com. And Sean Sutherland says, do you have questions? You see, Sean runs Ask Insurance, and he brings you the crazy Oregon news. And Sean is an expert when it comes to your insurance. Do you have enough insurance to cover your house if, let's say, well, there was a major fire, something that happens pretty frequently in Oregon? Maybe you need to ask insurance. Are you having problems with your health insurance? Don't understand really what the coverage is? You need to ask insurance. Or maybe you're one of those folks that have gotten to the age where you're doing Medicare. And that can be really confusing. So when you're confused and you need to ask insurance. And in particular, Sean Sutherland. He's the answer guy. All right, here's your crazy Oregon news. So the Oregon legislature closed up shop at the end of June, calling sine die, which is Latin for we're done screwing you until next session. One of the biggest takeaways is that the legislature adjourned without passing any kind of funding package for the Oregon Department of Transportation. None at all. No $15 billion package, no $12 billion package, no end of session $400 million package. They didn't even get a garbage bag full of empties. Zero. So, of course, the Democrats immediately blamed the Republicans, who are in the minority in both the House and the Senate. And more on that in a second. So after the session, the Oregon Department of Transportation and the governor said there would be layoffs and transportation will be crippled in the state. ODOT Director Chris Strickler, head of the organization that last year made a $1.1 billion accounting error, wrote a letter to the staff of ODOT saying that ODOT has been responsible with public dollars, that ODOT works hard to ensure Oregonians get what they pay for, and that there is no fat. Which is kind of funny because a recent audit of ODOT showed that typically the department goes 30 to 40% over budget on every large project. And of course, in a sly way, he blamed the Republicans in the legislature too. Now, his letter was met with harsh rebuttal from House Republican Minority Leader Christine Drazen, which she helpfully sent out to the media. In a pointed shot at ODOT Director Chris Strickler, Drazen in the letter said, "Stop gaslighting and do your job, Director Strickler." She continued, ODOT refused to respond to questions and instead obfuscated and dodged hard conversations in relation to what happened in the legislature. She said, "It appears you have since spread the false narrative that your agency leadership was working tirelessly to build awareness and support for their work. Well, you advanced backroom deals that failed to pan out." She further wrote, "Public employees should understand that by choosing to exclusively engage in political gamesmanship, you and the governor gambled and lost." Drazen concluded, "I would respectfully say you have no business playing the hero in staff emails while stoking fear among ODOT's workforce and conjuring up false narratives and imaginary villains." That's kind of harsh. Lawmakers, Democrats, the governor, and labor unions have all blamed Republicans for the failure of an ODOT funding bill. However, let's get down to facts. Democrats hold a 3/5 supermajority in both legislative chambers that Oregon requires to pass new taxes, and Democrats can do so with no Republican votes, meaning that none of the various versions of the transportation funding bill generated enough support among Democrats to result in a successful floor vote. Let's be honest, even though I think a lot of Oregonians are happy that they are not going to be saddled with record high tax increases, Democrats have themselves to blame for the failure of a transportation package. but that's not the name of the game. So, talking about layoffs at ODOT, the first wave of layoffs began for state workers at the Oregon Department of Transportation Monday. It was announced by Governor Tina Kotek's office. ODOT initiated 483 of an estimated 700 total layoffs Monday. Now, the layoffs were pretty much a known consequence, and it was expected after no funding package went through for ODOT. Now, the governor's office warns that ODOT is going to make a second wave of layoffs in early 2026 unless the legislature can get a funding bill passed before then. Governor Kotek said, quote, "Consequences to essential transportation services are imminent across the state. This is not business as usual. These layoffs constitute an emergency in Oregon, and the transportation system will hurt every part of the state." Now, she talks about the legislature coming up with a funding package. Well, Kotek actually has to call for a special session before anything can be done, and she has not done that. Among other actions being taken by ODOT is reducing the amount of sand and de-icer that they're purchasing for winter, and ODOT is delaying the replacement of aging vehicles. Some road projects are already being canceled. This winter, drivers, they say, should expect less snow removal and de-icing. But ODOT says, like this is something that everybody should take great faith in, senior staffers are staying on and fewer maintenance stations will close. Yeah, senior staffers are staying on. They're staying on because they're protected by the union. It's the people that came on later that are getting laid off. The senior staffers are protected by the union. Is that good? Is that bad? Well, the senior staffers do cost more per person. That said, Kotek also asked that personnel costs be balanced with material costs and anticipated needs heading into the fall. If the governor does call a special session, which she hasn't said that she will, lawmakers would still need time to create some sort of version of a bill that would garner enough Democratic votes to pass. Well, Eugene has a dubious honor. Part of the city is now an EPA Superfund site. An EPA Superfund site is considered to be one of the worst polluted states or places in the United States. The Environmental Protection Agency added the J.H. Baxter Site, which is in West Eugene, right next to the Bethel neighborhood, on its Superfund list. The business treated wood products, and the site is contaminated with dioxins. Now, a lengthy process is going to be needed to address the risks to public health and the environment. The designation is important because it unlocks, well, millions, if not billions of dollars in federal resources to clean up the plant, clean up around the plant, and be beyond what the site was initially budgeted for cleanup. It also places the facility on the EPA's list of the nation's most contaminated properties, right within the city limits of Eugene. It's going to require continual monitoring and some sort of remediation. Being a Superfund site also give the feds more authority to hold J.H. Baxter financially responsible for the cleanup. Now, the company's president, Georgia Baxter Krause, pleaded guilty to violating the Clean Air Act and making false statements to federal officials and other environmental violations back in January. The company closed down 3.5 years ago after it was discovered under Baxter Krause. The company illegally disposed of toxic wastewater with dioxins from wood preserving by evaporating it into the air, an operation that contaminated much of the Bethel neighborhood in West Eugene. Prosecutors say that J.H. Baxter vented more than 1.7 million gallons of chemical-laced wastewater between 2019 and 2021. Dioxins were found in the soil at many residences in West Eugene, and in a number of those cases, entire lawns and gardens had to be completely removed and replaced. Now, this really isn't what you would call an important story about Eugene, but it's pretty darned interesting. So, a local area club is in, shall we say, in a really stupid news pun, in a pickle. We're talking about the Emerald Valley Pickleball Club, which is a local nonprofit, and it has an all-volunteer staff devoted to playing pickleball. And they typically meet at Eugene's Westmoreland pickleball courts. So there's a structure there that used to be tennis courts, and now they have 8 pickleball courts. And they like to play there, which is to be expected because there's pickleball courts. What wasn't expected was a controversy over the courts because of the noise of playing pickleball. Now, a group of 10 neighbors began complaining to the city last September about the noise from pickleballs, which are played with hard plastic balls, and they're smacked with hard wooden rackets. Now, according to the club, Emerald Valley Pickleball, their members have had numerous meetings with the cities and the neighbors trying to rectify the problem. Pickleball, by the way, makes a pretty distinctive sound. The impact of a pickleball hitting one of the hard paddles creates a very sharp, high-pitched pop sound, which, if you listen to it, kind of sounds like a 22 going off. Neighbors claim the sound is distinct from other noise, and it travels really far. The city and the club have now received a letter demanding a cease and desist from, well, basically playing pickleball. It comes from the 10 neighbors in a letter written by their attorney, Lita Gorman of the HWS Law Group. It outlines the complaint that's been filed by the neighbors who want the Westmoreland pickleball courts to go away. Now, according to the letter, the impulsive, and I'm quoting it, the impulsive pop sound of a pickleball strike falls within a frequency range of 1 to 2,000 hertz, similar to the beeping of a reversing garbage truck or the alarm of a security system. The lawyer further writes, this high-pitched noise is used in alarms and sirens precisely because it catches attention and heightens awareness. Due to its frequency and the random nature of the strikes, residents cannot acclimate to the sound, and it continuously grabs their attention, making relaxation and concentration impossible. The complaint further reads, unlike the prior use of the courts for tennis, which never produced noise complaints, the constant barrage of pickleball strikes is intolerable and disruptive to daily life. The letter also outlines other noise from large crowds at the popular park and loud music at the courts. The letter also asserts, quote, the continuous noise from the pickleball courts has rendered it impossible for residents to enjoy their properties fully. The ability to use outdoor garden areas or leave their windows open has been completely compromised. From playing basically big ping pong? Anyway, it's unknown whether the city's going to act on the demand and close the courts down. The Emerald Valley Pickleball Club is currently circulating a petition to keep the courts open, and they're asking pickleball players to reach out to city councilors and the mayor. Now, here's what I find interesting. So the first complaints started coming in September. Now, mind you, this is a park that happens to have pickleball courts. And the pickleball courts have been at their current location for 9 years. Why now? So, Governor Tina Kotek has asked the State Department of Education to help school districts figure out the impact of federal cuts. Schools are supposed to get awards from the federal government every July 1st. But the U.S. Department of Ed has told states certain title awards are not going to be issued until each one of the applications is completely gone through. In other words, they're just not going to rubber stamp everything. Well, Kotek is angry. She says it hobbles districts as they prepare for the upcoming school year, and says her office is assessing next steps, which, of course, is possible legal action. The title funding is provided by the U.S. Department of Education and is supposed to be released at the beginning of the new fiscal year, which is July 1st, and then it's incorporated into the budget of the Oregon Department of Education. Well, on June 30th, the White House directed the Department of Education to withhold all education grant funding in the new federal budget until each grant is reviewed. In other words, they're just not going to rubber stamp it. Now, this is money that has not been promised. Unlike other money where there have been grants that were already allocated, and then the feds went back and said, yeah, no, we're not going to pay the rest of this or any of it, which led, of course, to lawsuits against the feds. In a statement, Governor Kotek said about the possibility of losing the title grants, quote, "This partnership between the schools and the federal government is crucial to delivering a high-quality, equitable education to all Oregon students, especially those historically left behind." Now, her statement about high-quality education might make observant Oregonians puzzled, considering Oregon has one of the worst education systems in the nation, ranking at or near the bottom in almost every educational benchmark. According to the state data, locally, Bethel, Eugene, and Springfield received about $2 million last year in title funding for educator training and other programs. And contrary to what the governor says, these title funds don't impact resources meant for schools with high percentages of low-income students or resources set aside for students with disabilities. Well, this was interesting. So the Bureau of Land Management in Oregon sent out a press release glowing with self-satisfaction late last week. They proclaimed that federal timber sales in Western Oregon brought in $5.7 million. That according to the BLM. And that the 19.2 million board feet is enough to build 1,200 homes. Now, the BLM manages 2.4 million acres of what the agency calls some of the most productive forests in the world, supplying, in their words again, a reliable source of domestic lumber to local mills and creating jobs. Okay. When you look at the numbers and you do a comparative analysis, $5.7 million and 19.2 million board feet is enough to, maybe build 1,200 homes, but it's utterly paltry. Let's look at 1980. In that year alone, the BLM supplied just shy of 1.2 billion board feet of timber in Oregon. In 1990, another 1.2 billion board feet. By the year 2000, that had declined to 100 million board feet. And even at that, you look at 19.2 million, that's a pretty flaccid amount. The declines are due, of course, to protecting the spotted owl and ongoing environmentalist lawfare that have cost Oregon billions of dollars in revenue, billions of dollars in tax money, and along the way, devastated rural economies. So let's look at it this way. Oregon experienced a significant decline in the number of lumber mills starting in 1995. Between 1995 and 2012, the number of Oregon softwood lumber mills decreased 43%. Between 1988 and 2017, the number of lumber mills in Oregon declined 53%, and they continue to shutter. Last year, in 2024, 7 Oregon lumber mills succumbed, taking with it 700 jobs. The U.S., by the way, used to lead the world in timber sales. And now the U.S. is the world's largest global importer of wood products, primarily from Canada, China, and Brazil. Now, our final story is crazy, and you kind of have to listen to the way this is laid out and kind of put all of the pieces together, because this truly is a Whiskey Tango Foxtrot story. So a 35-year-old Lane County man has been charged after Eugene police say he was responsible for multiple shootings in Eugene with at least one stolen gun. Now, that is according to court documents filed in Lane County Circuit Court. One of those shootings involved the killing of a cat that was shot several times while in a pet carrier and left to die. Court records show that Timothy Shelton was charged with 10 crimes over the last week in 3 separate cases, which include first-degree aggravated animal abuse, felon of a possession of a firearm, burglary, and theft. Now, the burglary charge is where this just gets really upside down. So that stems from an incident where Shelton allegedly met up with his realtor girlfriend in a house that she was listing for sale so they could have sex there. And during that visit, he allegedly stole jewelry and other items from the homeowner after the girlfriend realtor left. Now, Eugene police claim that the 57-year-old realtor, Stacy DeHart, was arrested for tampering with evidence, but they have not filed formal charges in the case. Court documents say that DeHart discovered the burglary the day after it occurred from the home that she was trying to sell for somebody else, and later some of the stolen items were discovered in Shelton's car. And she allegedly tried to get some of the items back, but she never reported the burglary to the homeowner or the police for fear of ruining her career. But it gets weirder. That stolen gun, Shelton is accused of stealing the gun from DeHart's husband from the couple's bedroom around the same time. The first shooting, by the way, was reported to Eugene police in March out on Highway 99 and Richard Avenue, where a bullet hole found in the side of a house. That right there is almost weekly world news quality. All right, your crazy Oregon news brought to you by Sean Sutherland of Ask Insurance. Ask Sean. He's a good dude. All right, Rick, roll out the reel. Crazy Oregon news is over.